Welcome friends to our exploration of Islamic thought and history. And now let's discuss the fascinating origin of the Mu'tazila, a theological group that emerged in the early to mid 8th century. While the beginning of this movement is shrouded in mystery and debate, the Mu'tazila went on to become one of the most influential school of thought in Islamic theology, especially noted for their commitment to reason and rational analysis. We'll be unpacking the early history of Mu'tazila, focusing on key figures like Wāṣil ibn ʿAṭāʻ and ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd, their doctrines, and the challenges in tracing the movement's origin. The origins of Mu'tazila, a theological group from the early to mid 8th century, remain unclear and speculative. However, after these obscure beginnings, the Mu'tazila became a prominent theological movement until the 12th century. Even after its decline in Sunni world, its influence persisted in Zaydism and Twelver Shiism for centuries. The Mu'tazila is known for its commitment to reason as the foundation for theological inquiry, distinguishing itself from the earlier theological approaches. They emphasize understanding God's nature, particularly His unity, Tawheed, and justice, al-'adl, through rational analysis. And these concepts become two of their 5 core principles. Their principles also include belief in punishment and threat, al-wa'd wal-wa'id, the idea of intermediate rank, al-manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, and this is for those who commit grave sins, and finally the duty to command right and forbid wrong, al-ʿAmr bil-ma'rūf wal-nahy anil munkar. The Mu'tazila argued that grave sinners were neither believers nor complete unbelievers, and they stressed free will and divine justice. The origins of the Mu'tazila movement have been explored in 3 main ways. First, scholars have investigated the meaning of the name Mu'tazila, why it was given to this group, and the circumstances surrounding its origin. Second, they have studied the early history of the movement, focusing on key figures like Wāṣil ibn ʿAṭāʻ and ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd, their relationship with each other and their disciples. The third way, they have examined how the doctrines from the movement's beginning relate to the later principles of Mu'tazilism. Research in these areas have been evolved over time, reflecting shifts in available sources and scholarly perspectives. However, a major challenge studying the Mu'tazila's origins is the scarcity and inconsistency of the sources. The earliest records date from at least a century after the movement's beginning, and they often conflict with one another due to the differing perspectives and the basis of their authors. Sources are typically divided into the Mu'tazili and Proto-Sunni or Sunni groups, which influences their accounts. For example, early Mu'tazili sources credit Wāṣil ibn ʿAṭāʻ as the founder, while the Proto-Sunni sources favor ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd, and later Mu'tazili sources recognize both as the co-founder. The true origin of the name Mu'tazila remains unclear, with different interpretation offered by various sources. And compounding these difficulties is the fact that no original work by the early figures of the Mu'tazila have been survived. We only have the mentions of their titles and scattered references to their doctrines, making it hard to verify their original ideas. So our understanding of the early Mu'tazila doctrines is based on sources that are removed both in time and content. The term Mu'tazila refers to a theological school in Islamic history that has generated considerable scholarly debate concerning its origin. Various theories explain why this group was called Mu'tazila, each reflecting a different historical, political, or doctrinal context. There are several explanations, and we will discuss a few. So, the first significant theory attributed to the early Islamic historian Abu Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Musa al-Nawakhti suggests that the term Mu'tazila originated during the aftermath of the assassination of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the third caliph, When Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu became caliph, three factions emerged: those who were loyal to Ali and those opposing him, and a third group that withdrew from both sides. This third group, which included figures like Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Abdullah ibn Umar, refused to fight for or against Ali radiallahu ta'ala. And this act of withdrawal or i'tizal is said to have led to their being labeled as Mu'tazila. However, the prominent Mu'tazilite scholars like al-Balkhi dispute this origin, arguing that the Mu'tazila's theological positions were not aligned with those who withdrew from Ali politically. Another perspective recorded by historian al-Malti and supported by scholars like al-Kawthari links the name Mu'tazila to a group of Ali's followers who chose to withdraw from both Hassan ibn Ali and Muawiyah after the peace agreement between them. This group decided to focus on religious study and worship instead of engaging in a political struggle, and so earning the name Mu'tazila. While this explanation is plausible, it raises questions about whether Mu'tazila of the post-Hassan period were indeed connected to the later theological movement that emerged in the time of Hassan al-Basri. A third account mentioned by Ibn Durayd and others suggests the term Mu'tazila originated from ʿAmr ibn Abdullah ibn Qais, a prominent early Muslim who withdrew from the study circle of Hassan al-Basri due to the contentious debates and dispute within it. And this withdrawal was seen as a sign of rejecting the prevailing religious debates and then branding him and his followers as Mu'tazila. However, this theory is often criticized due to chronological inconsistencies and the unclear connection between the ʿAmr and the later Mu'tazilite movement. The most widely accepted explanation, supported by numerous historical sources like al-Murtada and al-Baghdadi, is that the name Mu'tazila derives from Wāṣil ibn Attā's withdrawal from Hassan al-Basri's study circle. Wāṣil, along with his followers, broke away from Hassan over the theological issues of the status of Muslims who commit major sins. Wāṣil's stance that such individuals were neither believers and nor non-believers but occupied an intermediate position led him to form a separate group which Hassan reportedly labeled as Mu'tazila, meaning those who withdrew. This account is the most direct connection between the theological stance of Mu'tazila and their names. Another interpretation offered by Abu al-Qasim al-Balkhi and echoed by al-Baghdadi suggests that Mu'tazila were so named because they withdrew from the two dominant theological positions of their time. While the Kharijites considered grave sinners as unbelievers and some Murji'ites considered them as believers, the Mu'tazila proposed a third position, and that is withdrawing from both extremes. This act of theological independence is thought to be the reason behind their nomenclature. A related but distinct theory found in al-Mas'udi's writings posits that the name Mu'tazila reflects the doctrine of considering sinners or grave sinners as being in a state of distinct from both belief and disbelief. And according to this view, Mu'tazila saw grave sinners as neither fully believers nor unbelievers, but as occupying a middle position or middle ground, and then metaphorically withdrawing them from both categories. This doctrinal stance, rather than historical act of withdrawal, is seen as the basis for their name. The nomenclature of Mu'tazila is a complex and multifaceted issue reflecting the group's diverse origin and evolving nature of the Islamic theology and politics. Well, the most direct explanation ties the name of Wāṣil ibn Attā's withdrawal from Hassan al-Basri's circle. Other theories highlight the political and theological context that shaped the identity of Mu'tazila. And ultimately, the term Mu'tazila captures the spirit of a group that consistently sought a middle ground, whether in politics or theology, and then withdrew from both from prevailing norms of their time. As some of the scholars argued that the Mu'tazila movement began with Abu Hudayl al-Allaf, and it wasn't until the mid-9th century that Wāṣil and ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd were considered its founder. While some hold this view, most scholars recognize that both Wāṣil ibn ʿAṭāʿ and ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd played a significant role in its origin, even though their exact contribution are hard to determine. Both the men have distinct intellectual identities, and the available information on them is limited and needs verification within the broader historical context. Wāṣil eventually moved to Basra, but remained somewhat of an outsider. His supposed mentorship under Hassan ibn al-Basri likely didn't happen there, and although he had early connection to Medina, it doesn't mean he was a student of Abu Hashim, son of Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. However, his Madani's background likely influenced his support for the Alid causes and his doctrine that acknowledged the legitimacy of the first three caliphs, even though he believed Ali ibn Talib was the most deserving. Wāṣil was known for his ascetic lifestyle, but his skill in theological debates and rhetorical abilities made him stand out, attracting followers, and despite speech impediment, his talent with language allowed him to find the alternative expressions for the words he could then pronounce. There is credible reports that he delivered a memorable sermon before the Umayyad governor, though the existing version of his speech are likely not authentic. Wāṣil also sent his followers as missionaries throughout the Muslim world, probably inspired by his early debates with the Ibadis. These missionaries spread religious teachings through theological argumentation, supporting themselves through the trade and combining Wāṣil's asceticism with his rhetorical prowess. Notably, Wāṣil supported the idea of free will, a belief he shared with ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd, which helped him gain followers despite being an outsider in Basra. Wāṣil and ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd both supported the idea of free will, but it was central to ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd's thinking. Unlike Wāṣil, ʿAmr was more of a traditionist than a theologian, which led to criticism from other traditionists. While ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd wasn't a groundbreaking thinker or a prolific writer, his strong asceticism left a lasting impression, even earning respect from some of its opponents. Although ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd wasn't al-Hasan al-Basri's favorite student, his connection to him was significant and leading traditionists to distance Hasan al-Basri from him. Both Wāṣil ibn ʿAṭāʿ and ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd were politically neutral, believing that while one side in the Battle of the Camel was at fault, it was impossible to determine which one was. This neutrality extended to their views on the contemporary political conflicts. Wāṣil and his followers remained neutral in a politically charged environment, while ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd's neutrality stemmed from his sense of social justice and distrust of the ruling elite. Despite their differences in theology and doctrine, a prominent scholar, Venice, argued that this shared political neutrality was what initially united the Mu'tazila movement. However, this view is complicated by evidence showing that the first group, labeled as Mu'tazila, who participated in the revolt of An-Nafs al-Zakiyya, took a political stance contrary to both ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd and Wāṣil ibn ʿAṭāʿ's ideals. And this contradiction suggests that much about the early Mu'tazila movement remains unclear. One challenge in this narrative about the Mu'tazila movement is the relationship between Wāṣil ibn ʿAṭāʿ and ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd. There is evidence they knew each other well. Wāṣil married Amr's sister, and they both worked as weavers and attended Hasan al-Basri's study circle. It was said that ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd might have been Wāṣil's student, as suggested by poetry from Safwan al-Ansari. However, the scholar Venice doubts the story that ʿAmr converted to Wāṣil's waves after a debate about the doctrine of intermediate rank al-manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, suggesting instead that ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd's wave were influenced by Bakariya, a group associated with Hasan al-Basri. He further argues that it was Wāṣil's intellectual leadership, especially in Kalam and the doctrine of intermediate rank, that sparked the new movement, while ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd mainly helped introduce Wāṣil to the Basran community. The students of Wāṣil and ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd followed the different intellectual paths. Wāṣil's students were mostly jurists, focused on religious debates, while ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd's students were mainly traditionists. After Wāṣil's death, many of his followers left Basra due to hostility, with some heading to North Africa, and the split among ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd's followers during the revolt of Nafs al-Zakiyya created another gap in the history of the movement, as we know little about the moderate followers who didn't participate. The scholar Venice is most certain about Wāṣil's contribution as a preacher and his mastery of Kalam or theology, influenced by the early Mu'tazila accounts. Later accounts tried to position ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd as the father of his school to distance al-Hasan al-Basri from Qadri connection. And as we have seen, the story of Mu'tazila's origin is complex and filled with competing narratives, particularly regarding the relationship between Wāṣil ibn ʿAṭāʿ and ʿAmr ibn ʿUbayd and their contribution to the movement. While the exact details remains elusive, what is clear is the profound impact that Mu'tazila had on Islamic thought, their innovative use of reason in theology.